The following program is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
The old guy that I sold the $870 a pound to asked me if I had any man root. It looks like a man will have 2 legs, 2 arms, and a head. The body is the main part of the root. He was willing to give us $1,000 a root.
This is Outlook, a reflection of our place, our time, and our people.
There is a myth in ancient Chinese herbalism, which is the foundation of Chinese traditional medicine. The story begins about 5,000 years ago. There was a man named Shen Nung. He conducted experiments on himself to find out which plants were suitable for humans. The legend says that Shen Nung had a crystal belly and could see the effects of what he ingested. One of the herbs he discovered was ginseng. He recorded his findings in a book that was simply called the Medicine Book of Shen Nung. He discovered ginseng creates a balance in the human body, which is still believed today.
For Chinese philosophy, people think yin and yang, that is, everything is composed of 2 parts, and like the light, dark, male, female, hot, and cold. And the Chinese philosophy believe that if you want to make the perfect statue, is make everything in balance. And ginseng is kind of like a medicine, can enlarge the fire. So especially for good old people, because when people getting old, Chinese think like the fire become to ashes. So you need to put more fuels in it, and so the fire can become bigger and bigger.
Most popular ginsengs in the world from a consumption standpoint are Panax ginseng, which is found in Asia. They call that Asian ginseng. And we have here in Eastern North America, Panax quinquefolius, American ginseng. Those are the 2 most popular in terms of the volume that's consumed and so on. And they each, depending on who you talk to in the traditional Chinese medicine world, have slightly different energetic properties. It just, again, some people don't agree with it 100%, but they're, generally you'll read that American ginseng has a more cooling property, more yin associated with it, whereas Asian ginseng has more yang associated, more fire, more heating properties. Younger people are generally advised to take American ginseng since it cools your kind of fiery spirit in many cases, whereas older adults, because their energy is waning, are encouraged to take Asian ginseng.
It's kind of unique, and I've never been to Hong Kong, but a lot of my constituents have, and they say that in one block of Hong Kong, he found at least, I believe he said, 6 ginseng shops. And I've been into the Chinatowns in many of the large cities in the U.S. and other parts of the world, and you can go in one shop and you can find ginseng in almost 300 different forms. They'll have it the neck separated from the roots, or they'll have it laying this way or that way. They'll just sell it, market it. It's amazing how many different ways they'll market it.
The first time ginseng were used was about 2,000 years ago, and it was used by noble people and for kings or even emperors. And people believe that ginseng can make dying people back to life.
It's considered to be an adaptogen, which means that whatever is ailing you in your body, it'll adapt to that and go to it and help heal it and everything. And it's got the yin and the yang, the proper properties there. And also, it's considered an aphrodisiac in most parts of the world, and that's a big push for a lot of people. But yeah, they will buy ginseng when they can't afford a lot of other things to put on their tables.
Most expensive ginseng is kept in red boxes, wooden boxes with red cloth as background. And every root was perfectly kept. And it may worth thousands of dollars or even $10,000. That's expensive.
There's traditional Chinese medicine that's still in play in the Asia Pacific Rim, that part of the world. That's not going to change. That's, as far as I can see and anybody else can see, it's been around for 2,000, 3,000 years, and it's here to stay. They just are adopting Western traditions in their healthcare system that tend to make sense and that tend to improve their their healthcare, but they're not throwing out necessarily older traditions. So there's always going to be a demand for high quality ginseng.
The cultivated ginseng that is put in the bottles to make the powders, the extracts, they look at the ginsenoside level, which is one of the marker constituents that most companies consider to be the active constituent to be used that helps the adaptogen and aphrodisiac and all the other properties. So cultivated ginseng is bought on that, it's graded on it. In other words, when they buy your ginseng, they analyze it, test it in a lab, and see the level of ginsenosides, and they'll pay you based on the higher ginsenosides. In Hong Kong, they don't care about that. They want to know the aesthetically, how does it look? Is it got a good dark color? Has it got a good shape to it? You know, they always talk about the man root, but has it got a good shape? Is it bulby or is it long, depending on what they're looking for?
是从森林
自然的这里面的。
Yes, yeah.
好，那我们这里来一下就知道。我17岁，跟我爸爸学中医。
He learned Chinese medicine from his father when he was only 17 years old.
但是看见我爸爸用美国的野生和中药配伍，使 medicine 大大提高了疗效。
At that time, he saw his father use American ginseng to improve the efficacy of Chinese medicine.
但是如果一般的中药，他会用10天或者20天，只有一点点的感觉。但是如果野生加进去了，他只要服3到2天，一般都会好。
If a patient eat the Chinese herb medicine without ginseng, he probably will need 10 or 15 days to get better. But when we put the ginseng together with the medicine, he only needs 3 days, to getting better. In his 17, his father told him, if you want to be a good doctor, you have to know how to identify the quality of ginseng.
They've got people whose whole purpose in life is the art of grading out the ginseng root. You know, that's what they've done. They come from families that do that, and so that's what they do. They spend their whole life evaluating the qualities of the root, and you sit there and try to figure out why they would grade one this way and the other that way when they look the same, and you're never going to get to the bottom of it. They've got some sort of mental art in their mind that they're grading to. So we can pick out certain root shapes, you know, spider root or bulby root, that sort of thing, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. They're graded 100 more ways.
Ginseng, for people in Appalachia for centuries, is one of those things that's represented hope. The plant itself, the root, everything is used or can be used, even the berries, but primarily the root has always had a value, and that's why I say hope. When everything else is down, people have been able to go to the woods and primarily focus on ginseng because of its high value. And it's, you know, it's bought the shoes for the kids going back to school.
I think American ginseng is not recognized for the cultural importance that it has provided in North American history. And I'm talking about Native Americans and beyond Native Americans since colonization. We tend to look at it as this poor plant at this point in history that's just being, you know, raped and pillaged from the wildlands, and we ignore all of the important human interaction that has occurred since about 1700 in North America. A lot of people care about this plant, and that's not new. True ginsengs belong to a botanical genus known as Panax. That's true ginsengs. There's a lot of stuff that has been marketed under different ginseng names, Siberian ginseng, for example, Indian ginseng. So Panax has about 11 species in it, 2 of which are found in North America. The other species, 9 species in total, occur in Asia. And so the one that people tend to think about in terms of being important as a medicinal plant is actually Panax ginseng, the Oriental ginseng or the Asian ginseng. That is the one that's been used for thousands of years in the Orient. And there's a variety of other species that have been used locally and are now coming to light as important international trade items. But Panax ginseng is the big one that has a long history in the Orient. Okay? And interestingly enough, at this point in history, we export, as you probably are aware, all of our finest ginseng to the Orient, and we import all of the junk from the Orient, right? That's just the way the commodities markets run right now. So we put it in Pepsi, and I had some in Arizona green tea this morning. Yuck.
Yeah, the Appalachians probably, Kentucky is the leading state in terms of export of wild ginseng. I think West Virginia or Tennessee are second or third in that regard. And I believe the harvest in West Virginia, between 15 and 20,000 pounds a year are harvested, and at a price of anywhere from $300 to $500 a pound or more. It does have an impact, I think, on rural economies. So I do think that there are some people who, I know I deal with these people in New York even, and if it weren't for a little bit of ginseng money, a lot of diggers I know will dig ginseng in September into October, and then they'll sell it around Christmas time. And in many cases, that's the difference between their kids getting Christmas presents and not getting Christmas presents.
I originally dug ginseng with my grandfather. I started in probably 79, 78. He always told me there was gold in the hills. And I didn't realize what he was talking about. He was talking about ginseng. When we got old enough to go, he started taking us. And that grew into, I dug everywhere around here and thought I could bring back the little stuff and grow it. And it done well, so I started buying berries. And that's been 25, 30 years I've dealt and messed with ginseng. So.
First gentleman that ever took me out, when he was walking for ginseng, even though it's a perennial plant that grows, 12 to 18 inches on the ground, he never looked down. And we'd always walk like this when we were wildcraft. And when first time I was with him, I thought, well, that's crazy, ginseng doesn't grow on the trees. But what he was doing was, he looked at the type of trees, he looked at the exposure, which side of the lay of the land, which southwest, west facing, and then he would see the trees and he'd go, okay, ginseng's around here somewhere, and inevitably we would look around and we'd find it then.
When you're out hunting in the wild, you'll find it in areas like this where it's protected from the animals. You got jaggers around here, white cohosh, a little hard maple, right here's a little hard maple, and that also keeps the mulch on it. When the leaves fall off in the winter, if a wind comes by, it holds the mulch in place where it likes mulch. But you usually just don't find it outgrown right out in the open because it'll be ate off. Deer will have it ate off because they love it. Around my area, they do.
This is kind of a typical but non-typical habitat for American ginseng in the region. Hardwood forests. We're in a nice, beautiful hollow. This is a wild area, and this is the kind of place you would expect to see true wild ginseng being found. So next to this plant that's been browsed, you can see probably one of the holy grails of the ginseng world. This is an elusive six-pronged plant. So when you look at the back of this, you'll notice that there are 6 branches on here with leaflets. Okay? That's fairly uncommon to see in the wild. In cultivation is another story, but in the wild you generally don't see big old plants like this, especially right next to a trail where we're standing. It's laid down on the ground, flat, otherwise it would probably be a little bit like thigh high or so. But we've got a whorl of 3 branches with another whorl of 3 branches coming in, and you can see that this is still in flower.
It's a craft, there's no doubt about it, it's a craft. So they would, you go out and you find it and then you craft it, and even harvesting and digging it is a craft, because if you just sling something down and you damage the root, you can take a root that could be, if you had a pound of them, worth $500 a pound, and you can devalue them to $100 a pound, because they don't want the skin broken on them, they don't want it poked, they don't want them scarred or anyway. So it's a craft even to know how to dig them out of the ground without breaking them and to bring as much of the fiber roots up as possible. So it's a craft all the way from the finding it to harvest it, to wash it, to dry it, and even to sell it, because otherwise you just you lose money when you do it. So
there you go. They're straight, but they look good. I'd like to train a dog to do that.
I'd say you could. It's got its own smell.
Well, I had an old timer told me he had a ginseng dog one time down in the mountains.
Laugh at him?
No, I believed him. I believed him. Said if he barked once, he didn't worry about it, but he starts to howl and he went and got it.
Some friends of mine got me into hunting it when I was a teenager, and it was fun, but I never could find a lot. So I knew if I started planting it, I could have a lot more. Yeah, because I couldn't keep up with them guys. They were real good hunters and I wasn't, and now I think I got a little more than them. Well, I got 6 acres in this fence, and I got 1 outside, and we got 4 over there right now, and we're putting 1.5 acres in this fall. Oh, wow. But if we get all the laws straightened out where it's not going to be banned from exporting, we'll really go big then. Because you can't invest a lot of money in this and 10 years down the road find out you can't sell it.
Sure. Why would that be?
They think it's going extinct.
It's not so endangered of. Mike and I ourselves, if you use the low numbers at 5,000 seeds per pound, we've put about 300 pounds in the ground over the 8 years. That's 150,000 seeds in the ground right there. That's hardly endangered. No, that's 1.5 million, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bunch.
Wrong. It's a bunch of seed. It's not endangered. It's here. It's not going to go nowhere. We're going to keep it here. And there's several others of us. I think there's 220 in the group right now. Of growers.
Yeah, there was 300.
That's in the state of, well, we've got a few.
220 now.
Somewhere, yeah, we're between 200-300. It's a, we'll not give you an itemized list of who's growing ginseng in the state of West Virginia.
There's several.
That list has not been seen by any eyes, I don't think.
I couldn't understand why they didn't have ginseng as a crop. You plant the berries, and then the Fish and Wildlife could tell you that it was endangered and you couldn't grow it or sell it because of the wild ginseng. I didn't want to be stuck with a bunch of wild ginseng. We're growing it as wild, but we planted it. It's mine. I planted it like I did corn. We still didn't get it changed over to the agriculture. That's one thing they didn't do, but they still have restrictions on wild ginseng. But they also, at a meeting I attended, I asked them to define wild ginseng, and they said anything that wasn't
touched by man's hand.
Yes, and I said, well, most of the ginseng I had dug was some old timer who told me it was there. So he had took care of that ginseng when he was young, and then he got old and couldn't do it, and he found out I was digging it, and he said, well, did you go here or did you go there? And Fish and Wildlife, that's not wild ginseng to them.
Man touched that seed and put it in the ground, makes it not wild.
They still don't know the origin of the ginseng they're looking at. Whether somebody planted it last year or a few years ago, or whether a bird dropped a seed there 50 years ago that got this started, but the bird may have dropped the seed that he got off a plant that my grandfather planted across the hill. You have no idea. Or somebody may have bought ginseng seed from Sears and Roebuck 50 years ago that came off of a planting in what state? Who knows? So, yeah, it's not one of those things. It's a nightmare for the Fish and Wildlife Service because it's not one of those things that they can say this is wild and this is not.
There are no reliable data regarding the actual extent or impact of the industry. The only numbers we have are what U.S. Fish and Wildlife compiles, which are total exports by the year.
It's because ginseng is a CITES listed plant. It's on the endangered species list. Every year, every ginseng root or every pound that's shipped out of the country has to be documented. So every year you can find that on the what's on the U.S. CITES side of the U.S. government, that we have to determine how much is shipped out of each country as well as each state. We keep up with it. So the states are ready. As a matter of fact, this last year, out of the 19 states in the United States that ship ginseng, usually Kentucky and West Virginia are the top two. They kind of vied for the top two as far as quantity of root shipped and the value. But last year, actually, North Carolina was #1.
I think as Western culture starts to find more and more use for it, Western medicine, the value is only going to intensify. So the farming of ginseng is probably going to be really all we have at some point. We're just kind of on the tail end of a culture we're losing as far as the harvest of wild ginseng. It's going to be more and more dependent upon ginseng farming. Now, you would not have ginseng farming if you done away with the harvest of wild ginseng, because you lose that culture, you lose the people that place value on ginseng that know about it. If nobody's allowed to use ginseng or sell ginseng in international markets, they go somewhere else. Ginseng disappears.
Both in academic research and just from a reality check kind of standpoint, that as long as people wait for berries and seeds to mature and they plant them in the ground, that people can actually be a benefit to ginseng. And if it wasn't for people, there probably wouldn't be ginseng out here. So people have I guess a dual influence, some of it bad, some of it good, but at this point in history, there's so few scattered patches that it just makes sense to engage people in trying to propagate the plants in these areas and encouraging them to plant the seeds, that sort of thing.
It's a very regulated industry, but it's a very good example of what needs to happen when a plant is so valuable and revered, such as ginseng, because it's got a lot of good properties, a lot of good history too.
China has a huge requirement for ginsengs, and somehow, and for recently the ginseng product is not as expensive as used to be, so normal people can afford it, and a lot of people, they buy ginsengs and send to their parents and send to all the people, grandpa, grandfather, as gift.
Northern Kentucky, southern West Virginia ginseng is the highest priced ginseng in the world. That's a great, great thing for us. I still have a full-time job. This is a hobby, you know. I don't draw any paycheck off of this yet. But I can see myself digging enough ginseng where I won't need that other job in 5 years. I see that happening. Now, I'm not saying I'll quit my other job, but my 17, 15-year-old stepsons can dig this and create a job for themselves. Hopefully I can make this happen. You know, I've got a lot of dreams that need to fall into place here. We're heading the right direction. I've got a lot of ginseng growing.
Ginseng is a part of American history, an important part of American history, I think. And you know, trying to ban it or outlaw it or restrict it in such a way that destroys that culture, I think that's a bad thing. I think that there are generations of people that grew up learning how to harvest wild ginseng from their grandparents, and it's an American tradition that's been passed on, like hunting or fishing or things like that, and I would hate to see that disappear, particularly from places such as Appalachia, which is the ginseng's basically home range.
Support for Outlook is provided by the following.
The National Science Foundation's West Virginia Experimental Program to stimulate competitive research, investing in West Virginia's future by building infrastructure for scientific research. On the web at wvresearch.org.
This program has been a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.